Welcome to This Explainer. Look, if you've ever felt completely stuck trying to build a good habit, or, let's be honest, trying to break a bad one, you've probably blamed yourself, right? You've probably thought, I just don't have enough willpower. But we're going to dive into James Clear's incredible work on habit formation today. And as we'll discover, the problem really isn't you, it's your system. Let's see how making just tiny, atom-sized adjustments is the actual secret to massive transformation.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, a devastating setback, the story of James Clear.
To really understand this, we have to look at the terrifying escalation of a high school baseball accident. It was the final day of his sophomore year. A classmate takes a swing, the bat literally slips out of his hands and strikes James directly between the eyes. We're talking seconds here. In a fraction of a second, he suffers a broken nose, multiple skull fractures, and completely shattered eye sockets. Minutes later, he's walking to the nurse's office, totally unaware of how severe this head trauma actually is. But within hours, things go downhill fast. His body starts shutting down, he struggles to breathe, and they have to fly him by helicopter to a major hospital in Cincinnati. For days after that, to manage the extreme brain swelling and repeated seizures, doctors had to place him into a medically induced coma. I mean, this was the absolute worst-case scenario.
Now, you can imagine rebuilding your life from that kind of devastating physical and mental trauma. That does not happen overnight. When James finally woke up and started his incredibly grueling recovery, he simply couldn't rely on making massive, sweeping life changes. He had to start incredibly small. And that leads to this crucial idea. The seed of every habit is just a single, tiny decision. As you repeat that tiny decision, it sprouts. The roots dig in and it grows. That's exactly how he put his life back together. Literally one tiny decision at a time. Which brings us to Section 2. What are atomic habits? Small but mighty.
So let's break that down. An atom is, an extremely small amount of a thing. It's a single building block of a larger system, kind of like a single Lego piece. But remember, atoms are also the source of immense explosive energy. And a habit is just a routine or practice you perform regularly. So put those together and you get an atomic habit. It's a regular practice that is incredibly small and super easy to do, sure, but it's also the source of absolutely incredible power. They're basically the compound interest of self-improvement.
There's this brilliant analogy from the text that makes this so easy to visualize. Think about it like this. Breaking a bad habit is like trying to uproot a massive, powerful oak tree that's been growing inside of you for years. It is tough, and it takes some serious, deliberate work. But on the flip side, building a good habit, that's like cultivating a very delicate flower. It just needs you to show up and water it a tiny bit, one single day at a time.
So how do we cultivate that flower? Let's look at Section 3, Systems Instead of Goals, Changing Your Approach.
Notice the total paradigm shift here. We are so used to focusing on goals, right? And goals are all about winning the game. But the problem is, when you only focus on the goal, you're implicitly telling yourself, okay, once I hit that milestone, then I'll be happy. You're literally restricting your own happiness. Systems are about continuing to play the game. When you fall in love with the process rather than just the final product, you don't have to wait around to be happy. You get to be satisfied anytime your system is running. It sounds crazy, but true long-term thinking is actually goalless thinking.
And honestly, this right here might just be the most important sentence to remember from our entire explainer today. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. Think about that for a second. If you're struggling to change your habits, your desire to change is not the issue. The issue is simply that you're using the wrong system for change. Bad habits don't keep repeating themselves because you want them to. They repeat because your system naturally leads right back to them.
To fix that system, we need to dive into Section 4, the habit loop explained, how behaviors become automatic. You can think of this like a super simple flowchart. Literally every single habit you have goes through these exact 4 steps. First up is the cue. This is when your brain notices a reward. Second is the craving. You start wanting that reward. Third is the response. That's the actual action you take to get it. And finally, number 4, the reward itself. This satisfies your craving, and it teaches your brain to remember this specific action for the future. Make no mistake, if a behavior is missing even one of these 4 stages, it just won't become a habit.
And seeing how those 4 stages actually connect as a circle really brings the whole concept home. This creates an endless neurological feedback loop: cue, craving, response, reward, that is constantly running in the background of your life. It's always scanning your environment, predicting what's going to happen, and testing out different responses. By the time we're adults, we almost never even notice these loops happening.
You just automatically tie the same shoe first, or you unplug the toaster without even consciously thinking about it.
Which brings us perfectly to section 5, crossing the habit line, reaching automatic castity.
Looking at this curve makes what is actually a pretty complex psychological process incredibly easy to visualize. See down there at the bottom left, point A? That's you just starting out. The habit requires a massive amount of effort and concentration. But as you repeat it, you start moving up the curve toward point B. It's getting easier, but you still have to think about it. Finally, with enough practice, you hit point C and you cross that dashed line. That's the habit line. Once you cross that threshold, bam, the behavior happens more or less without thinking. Your non-conscious mind completely takes over the wheel.
So what does this actually look like in the real world? Well, this graph plots real data of someone building a super simple habit, just walking for 10 minutes after breakfast every day. The horizontal axis tracks the days, and the vertical axis shows how automatic the habit is feeling. Notice how all those little X marks trend upward in that nice curve? As the repetitions increase day after day, the action gets more and more automatic, right until it levels out at the very top.
And looking at that data reveals a seriously profound truth about behavior change. People are always asking, how many days does it take to form a habit? Is it 21 days? 30 days? But you know what? That is completely the wrong question. The secret isn't about how much time is crossed off on the calendar, it's all about frequency. It's literally about how many times you repeat that habit loop we talked about earlier. I mean, you could do something twice in 30 days, or you could do it 100 times in 30 days. It is the sheer number of repetitions that actually pushes you across that habit line.
So we've seen how James Clear rebuilt his life from a devastating tragedy using these tiny atom-sized routines. We've seen how your systems matter so much more than your goals, how the habit loop actually maps out our behavior, and how frequency is the ultimate key to reaching automaticity. Since your life is ultimately just a reflection of your systems, it all comes down to making the smallest possible unit of change. So I want to leave you with this final provocative thought. What tiny 1% improvement, what absolute atom of a habit will you choose to start repeating today to completely change your future? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I absolutely can wait to see the incredible systems you build.